Check, check. Check, check. Check! Okay, so I'm Toby Meyer. I know most of you. I was asked earlier this week to give a presentation on system hardening, and I happen to be presentation number 3, so that means you all have had your fill already, you've drunk from the fire hose, you want to be done with the day probably. I don't know if there are any Madame Maisel fans out there. Have you watched the show? Yeah? So there's one episode where she goes in the bar and she's got the like number 3 time slot, and then a couple other come in and they take like the 3 slot, and she gets pushed down a little bit further and further, and she's trying to amp herself up that she's really got the best slot because, you know, it's working out best for her. But anyway, so I have the number 3 slot. Yeah, so first a personal note, because I have the mic and I'm proud of my kids. My daughter is in the PMEA District 1 Festival tonight, which is at the Mount Lebanon High School. So yeah, she's singing in a choir of like 160 students, and then she actually went through whatever the trials are, and she's like 4th chair in her voice group, so she was going on to districts, which is in like a month. So if you're not doing anything and in the Mount Lebanon area, go to the high school tonight, you'll see a good performance. The second of which is my son is a freshman at CMU in machine learning and data science, and he has an internship, or is looking for an internship for the summer. So if you have any knowledge of positions around that area, please let me know. I have his resume and I'll be happy to get it to you. All right, so to what we're doing today. We're talking about system hardening. We're going to back it out a little bit so that we're talking in general terms about the best practices, what system hardening looks like, and then we'll narrow into more vSphere specific stuff, okay? That's my Twitter handle. Yeah. Oh. All right. So what is system hardening? In the broad sense, we're talking about an attack surface of the network or a multitude of systems and trying to reduce that attack surface. And this is not a one-time event, you know, like prior to production where you validated that it's the case and you release it, but it's kind of an ongoing posture. So many think of it just kind of in a point in time, but it's important that there be some audits or some ongoing verification. Oh. Ariel. I can just walk up and hit the, that's fine. Okay, so system hardening is not easy. You can do everything best on your OSs, on your network and what, and then tell me about that spam email that you clicked on again, right? So there's a user portion of this. There's a user layer and a lot of training that's involved there. But rather than thinking, oh, I've got myself covered, like everything's in place, you know, this will never happen to me, trust me, you have users that will test your posture. So in terms of general system hardening and best practices, you want to have a baseline to know where you're at present. And you would do that by running a scan, such as with Nessus. There are other tools to find out what the potential vulnerabilities are, what might be flagged as weaknesses. You want to only enable the services that are required. So you're going to disable non-essential services, get rid of any applications that are not in use, are old, whatever, deprecated, get rid of them. And of course, you want to make sure that you have the latest OS patches in place, that any vulnerabilities have been addressed. I would prefer to stand over there, but then I'm not in front of the camera, which is here. So, yeah, all right. You want to do things like configure your system logging so that it's being syslogged, that you have a centralized place that it's not lost on the server or the particular client should that be compromised. And then beyond having network firewalls, you want to have some host-based firewalls implemented, such as a Windows firewall or IP tables. You want to have encryption in place to protect your critical data. And certainly physical security is a concern, that your data center is cordoned off, that only people that are supposed to have access to that physical space do, that they're identifiable with their badges and the like. You want to isolate key services so they're not all on one system. So if you want some HA involved, you want to have multiple servers hosting those services. Don't put all your eggs in the one basket. And then certainly in terms of that, like creating a division between public services which need to be externally accessed, because there's a different users group that's reaching those, versus internal services, and redundancy for multiple essential services. And further, you want to have antivirus deployed, things like an IDS and IPS, because you need defense in depth. This is not just a single layer, it's across multiple systems and multiple layers. And configure the strongest authentication that's possible. There's a big push recently for multi-factor authentication. I don't know if you have that at your place of work. We use Duo, which has like soft tokens which can be sent as prompts like to your smartphone. Or you can also use YubiKeys, like having a physical token if you're in a space that you can't have access to your smartphone. But Duo is a helpful service for things like that. And disabling any weak authentication. Further and lastly, in depth about we want to, at the application layer, do things like address the administrator accounts, restrict what they have access to, even preferentially disable them entirely, and have users placed in the role as administrator, having passwords that are complex, addressing things at the file system layer, like permissions on the files, on the volumes, etc. And then rather than local accounts, using some sort of a network account so you can manage these things centrally. So cybersecurity? What? Ain't nobody got time for that. Right? I want to be able to get access to it on my smartphone. Like, don't put those restrictions in place. All that stuff's way too hard, right? But no. So yeah, there's a place for it, and you need to do it. So do it. So it kind of, that's the general landscape. Let's speak more narrowly about vSphere. So in the more recent release of vSphere, rather than having security as kind of a bolt-on sort of thing, that the vSphere administrator, your virtualization expert, would then check all the configuration settings and begin restricting and narrowing down. They've moved more to a model which is kind of like out-of-the-box secure by default. So much more restricted, and if you need things to be enabled, then you go in and the opposite, you make sure that they are enabled. But there are a few things that you would want to restrict, that you would want to verify what your policy in your organization is, what those requirements are, and take a look at them. So I've listed a few of them here, which we'll talk about the particulars as we go. Okay, so here's a screenshot. I was thankful to see I'm not the only one with the eye chart. There have been a few up here already. But this is a screenshot of disabling some of the firewall services. You might think, well, I restrict firewall stuff, direction, what destination port can talk to what source port over what channel and all that kind of stuff on my network firewall, but you need to do it at the hypervisor level also. You'll notice here on the far right, all of these alls means that anything that can traverse this network can also talk to my ESXi server, which is not a good thing. So you want to go in there, put your particular IP ranges to restrict that and narrow it down. You'll see all of the services here, what ports they're running on, etc. But like the SIM server, if you're not using some sort of a monitoring system that aggregates this stuff, then you would turn that off. Now, obviously, it's a good thing to have monitoring and have this stuff on your network, but I'm just saying that as a consideration. Okay, so vSwitch settings. This is something else, like out of the box, on your security for vSwitch 0, you'll notice that it's in that promiscuous mode is rejected. What that means is that I'm not acting as a span port. I can't just sit there on the network and listen into any traffic that's happening, which is a good thing. I mean, you may want to have a sensor on your network and put it in promiscuous mode, but that should be an exception, not the rule. And you would want to manually make that decision. Out of the box, you'll also notice that MAC address changes are accepted. So that means that on a VM, I can just, instead of having that virtual address there that has the beginning part that's vendor of the VMware and then my particular VM's ID associated with it, I can just go in and change that and make it something else. Which means I could also make it the same thing as another VM and have it then be masquerading on the network as another VM that it's not. So ordinarily, you would want to go in and turn that to reject. Same with forged transmits. I could make my VM be a middleman to just pass traffic along, and I can forge my packets in order to say, to act like I'm a VM that I'm not. So these three things, you ordinarily, best practice would be to set these to reject. Okay? So another thing, patches, right? Yeah, we all know we need to install patches, but how many of you do it with routine? And it is arduous to move from, say, 5.5 to 6, or from 6 to 6.5, and we're not there yet, but 6.7 is available. Maybe some of you are beginning to take a look at that. My encouragement to you, though, is because of the security stuff that's built in, the restrictedness that comes with 6.5, that you escalate your that project and you find a way to make it happen. Because it includes things like VM level security and a lot of these things out of the box, which will really improve your posture. Is everyone using VMware Update Manager? Yeah, have you set baselines that you? Yeah, we have some VIBs that we include in our baseline for the Dell servers, the Broadcom NICs, the HP servers NICs, and then certain modules that we load, which we've created internally that we also want to run. But this is a nice way to check that hosts are compliant and push them across. Okay, so also you'll want to check your security profile. Under here, you'll see the services that are running. The direct console means that if I'm in the data center, I can just plug in my VGA cable and my USB cable with a crash cart, and I can just hop on it, right? And I can get access locally. Well, you may trust everyone in your data center, but maybe you're a vendor and you have an appliance that you're selling, and you have that embedded, in the data center of your client, and you want to just have that disabled. But even if you have some role segregation in your organization, and not everyone is a VMware administrator, you don't want the summer intern or what hopping on some box and just hammering away and seeing if you can get in, right? So you would disable the direct console unless you need it. Like you can just go in here, fire it up, and then walk over, or if necessary. Normally that should be turned off. The ESXi shell, right? If you hit F2, then you can go in on the console, you can change your IP addresses, you can test your management interfaces and what. But if you hit F1, then you get a shell that you can log in. And basically, under the covers, there's a stripped down version of Linux there, right, that you can run some commands on. Ordinarily, that should be disabled or not running, stopped, which is highlighted at the bottom. And then SSH, I had one server I was trying to hit this morning. I thought the thing was down because I hit 3 others, SSH right in, it prompted me for my key, yes, you know, I want it, so I go. But it was disabled, which is good, right? So you can even, rather than hitting these on a per host level, right, maybe I enabled it and I went and did what I needed to, and then I forgot to disable it. These, if the host reboots, can be set to stopped on reboot, but I might want to have a PowerShell script that I run on some occasion just across all my hosts and make sure that they're stopped, because that's the default position, status that I want them to be in. I don't know if you've taken a look in here at the security profile, but by default, you'll have the host image profile acceptance level as partner supported. So you might install your ESXi image straight, like download it straight from VMware. You might grab a bundle of it from Dell or HP or IBM, whoever your server vendor is.